It's Sunday, and today we are continuing the discussion about autonomy. Today I'm going to go into a lot of semantic stuff, especially in relation to words being used and their definitions and how that interacts with the concept of autonomy. So this is going to go a little bit deep, and it's also going to go a little bit random. So bear with me though, because I feel like it is an interesting journey looking at the words people use and what they mean and why they use them. So let's start with autonomy definition from dictionary.com, which is independence or freedom as of the will or one's actions. By this definition, autonomy is a freedom of will or actions. Beyond this definition, though, what right do any of us have to autonomy? Obviously, women say, my body, my choice, or I want bodily autonomy, but I started thinking about it and I wondered where exactly in our Constitution or anything does the right to autonomy even exist. In the Declaration of Independence, one of the most important documents that began and holds the foundation of the American concept of freedom, states that men, here meaning mankind as I read it in today's context, are endowed with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. From this declaration, one can argue two things. First, you can look at this and say that because it states that men are endowed with the right to life, then a fertilized egg has to come into life or have that opportunity, no matter what inconvenience or detriment to the life of the mother there may be. Let's look at the definition of man here. An adult male person, or a member of the species Homo sapiens, or all the members of this species collectively without regard to gender. Obviously, going by the first definition of man, a fertilized egg is not an adult male, by way of lacking in the area of being an adult, not to mention by way of there being the 50-50 chance that the fertilized egg is a female. Thus, we would have to carry the second definition as our basis, which boils down to humankind. How deep into the semantics one would like to go is the important question at this point. And you're here with me, so we will proceed further into the concept because I can't help but wonder what lies inside. The idea of a fertilized egg having the right to life hinges on the fact that a new set of DNA has been established, which I'll talk about in detail when I get to the conception section of this podcast. The DNA is a new entity that has the potential to be born and grown into an adult human. This very singular and specific way of defining man gives way to many issues of other things that contain one's DNA, like hair or skin cells. If the existence of DNA is all that is required to qualify something as having the right to life, then there is a serious genocide every time someone brushes their hair or takes a shower, as there are cells that contain one's DNA in the hair follicles and the skin cells. Here is the breakdown and the issues with looking so singularly at this issue. If there is to be strict laws about a fertilized egg, then strictness can be argued to apply to other things that would either be absurd to protect or that cause the validity of the argument to be lost. Second, one can look at the idea of liberty, which is defined as freedom from arbitrary or despotic government or control. This is the first definition, but I feel it is important to look at the third definition as well, as it expands the concept. And again, I'm looking at this from dictionary.com. This definition sets liberty as freedom from control, interference, obligation, restriction, hampering conditions, etc., power or right of doing, thinking, speaking, etc., according to choice. The first definition looks more specifically at freedom from extreme government control, such as some forms of socialism, communism, or just straight-up dictatorships. As with anything pertaining to language, words like arbitrary and despotic can be somewhat subjective. For instance, one might say that the government making laws that ban abortion is a form of overreach into one's liberty, thus would be infringing on the rights of the individual. This same argument can be made about banning guns as well, but these perspectives depend on one's feelings and opinions rather than facts or definitions. And with these words, they are defined by certain states of law rather than single laws that have been set in place. This is why I included the second definition, because liberty is a much bigger subject than just as it pertains to government infringement. The broader aspect of freedom from control, interference, or the power of doing and thinking according to choice looks favorably towards the concept of autonomy. Returning once more to the definition of autonomy, independence or freedom as of the will of one's actions. One's actions comes through the choices that one makes. If you will yourself to get an education, then you make the choice to pay attention in class, to get a scholarship, and eventually go to university. Liberty offers one the option to choose this course of action and deal with any consequences that arise from it, whether that be getting a better job after school or dropping out due to burnout. This, it would seem, at least in linguistic terms, that the Declaration of Independence does state that we, the people, have the right to autonomy through liberty. Let's look a little closer to home and bring it to the second aspect of autonomy that I want to look at, which is bodily autonomy. As we just established, we are given general autonomy, but does that extend to one's body as well, or simply one's mind? Although liberty pertains to one's thinking, it also includes doing as well, which comes through the choices one makes and then subsequently does. For example, humankind has the bodily autonomy to drink alcohol, and even to drink alcohol to the point of damaging one's body. There are laws in relation to the age that someone is allowed to start drinking alcohol, but there's no limit set on what amount one is allowed to consume. Thus, we have bodily autonomy and simply reap the consequences of each choice made in relation to one's body, for the most part. Now, you might be holding your breath or simply shouting at me through your car speakers at this point, saying, abortion is different because it involves another human being who also has autonomy. I'm getting to that. This is certainly a snag in the bodily autonomy argument, and again comes back to the perspective problem of a fertilized egg and DNA. This is where the definitions of words are going to make some people frustrated. Words like embryo, fetus, zygote, baby. We have all these words for a reason, and that reason goes far beyond any intellectual or philosophical discussion of abortion. For example, there is a clear definition between the growth periods of a zygote, an embryo, and a fetus. Thus, we have each of these terms to help give distinction and understanding to what phase of growth one might be studying, looking at, or talking about. Thus, jumping from a fertilized egg straight to the term baby makes people frustrated at the very least and angry at the most. If there was no need for these terms, then a fertilized egg would be qualified as a baby, and we would not be having these discussions. But unfortunately, life is not that simple. But alas, the point still stands that there is a separate entity that exists in the mother's womb. I have no answer to this. At this point, definitions and use of language become so completely subjective that there's no way to give a solid answer. I myself still haven't been able to get off the fence of this one, and perhaps that is the right place to be. It is for me, at least. As a woman, of course, I want bodily and general autonomy. The thought of losing any freedoms or liberty to the government is horrifying, especially when one looks back at history. But equally, as a woman, I think about the day, and I hope to and work hard not to ever experience this day, where I look at that test and I find out that I'm pregnant. Terror is the only thing I can think of to describe that scenario in my head. But I cannot say I know what I would do. I sit on the fence because I know, and every woman knows, that there is something separate inside. It's a grave and heavy choice, and since that being does not have the ability to make choices or even understand what choice is, I, as a woman, have that choice. And you may say, well, when the government bans abortion, you won't. On the contrary, no matter what ban exists, women are going to find a way to make that choice. I trust myself, and I trust women. That is what bodily autonomy is to me. A trust of women to know that the fence is where we will always sit, because we understand the potential and the choice before us. If you are interested in commenting about this episode, you are welcome to. You can either send me an email at lawlessconversations@yahoo.com. That is LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS @yahoo.com. You can also comment on Twitter at Lawless Convos, LAWLESSCONVOS. Finally, you can also contact me on Facebook if you just look for Lawless Conversations, 2 different words, LAWLESSCONVERSATIONS. I look forward to hearing from you. The references to any sources that I use in each episode will be available in the bio, along with all of these social media connections. Join me next week as we start the journey into conception. This will be a 3-part episode section. The first one is going to talk about conception and biochemistry. So join me on Wednesday for that. Thank you for listening to this episode. I look forward to Wednesday.